believe it is our responsibility to resist the injustices done by our government in our names. We pledge to bring about justice, freedom, and peace. Another world is possible, and we pledge to make it real.
This is Anarchast.
Welcome to Anarchast. I'm with Leonard Melman of the Melman Report at the Toronto Resource Show. How are you doing, Leonard?
Just fine. It's been a great show.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good show. It's been a lot of fun. We were on the panel there together just a few minutes ago. We're just wrapping up here, and I know you're you said to me just a few seconds ago, your passion is liberty and freedom, and that's exactly what we talk about here on Anarchast. So I'm really excited to have you on, and tell us a little bit about your background from all of this.
Okay, well, strangely enough, I grew up in a very socialist household. My father was very much a labor union person. He even was an admirer of Karl Marx. My great turning point came in about 1975. I was living in Southern California at the time, and I met a very strong-minded individual. His name is Jay Eckel, and Jay is now, if he's not retired already, he's a justice in the state of California, a judge. And we met over some small public demonstration that had to do with freedom. And he said, well, this is only a tiny part. If you really want to learn about freedom, I want you to read one book. And he had me read Atlas Shrugged. And that is a life changer if you're open to it. And I was wide open. I took that message and began an odyssey that included meeting John Hospers, who was the first libertarian candidate for president. John Hospers wrote a book called Libertarianism, which was the first textbook of libertarianism. Through him, I met Murray Rothbard.
Oh, wow.
And later met Roger McBride, who was the 1976 candidate for the Libertarian Party for president.
Wow.
I eventually met Ron Paul, Harry Brown. I was president of several libertarian associations, and I devoured every word on freedom that I could find. The most influential of all was, Herbert Spencer, the great late 19th century British philosopher who wrote a book called The Man versus the State. And if anyone wants to get a real grounding in libertarianism, that is a marvelous place to go. So for almost 40 years now, libertarian thought, the thought of human freedom, like Ludwig von Mises' book title, Human Action, that's the only way of life that makes sense to me. And I look on government today as this utter monstrosity that's strangling every bit of life out of the population.
Yeah, it's interesting. Every single guest I've had on Anarchast, they say the exact same thing about when they first found out about liberty stuff. They say they use the exact same word. They say, I devoured it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens, and it happened with me. I first found out about this sort of thing through Doug Casey. And you've got a much longer history in liberty than me. I basically started my journey down the rabbit hole in about 2003. I just read one Doug Casey article, and I literally devoured anything that he wrote. I read it for about a month straight, and that's exactly what happens once you find these things, because most people actually don't even have access to these kind of things. That's for the most part, and everyone's got an interesting story about how they came across it, and it's usually just by chance you met somebody, and because you can't even find these sort of books in most libraries or anything like that.
You wouldn't even know where to begin looking for them.
Right.
And most public education will not speak a word of these famous authors of liberty. They
right.
just keep them hidden in some way. And even if an American president by accident turns out to be semi-libertarian, at least like Grover Cleveland, he is never taught again in any American school. Whoever hears of Grover Cleveland today, and yet if you read his inaugural address of 1893, it is absolutely a marvelous document of clear thinking.
Wow, and you're writing a book about him, aren't you?
I'm working. I've gotten several biographies of him. Fortunately, internet does have a lot of research of the actions of the president and all their documents, and I've got a file this thick now on him, and I'm working on that. after I complete a rewrite of my first book, which is called Reversing the Way In, which is a work on the concept that we're in this entire mess because of the massive growth of government, and the only hope to get out is to reverse the way in. So I've got both those projects going, plus my other work on the website and the magazines I write for. It keeps me pretty busy.
Sounds like you keep pretty busy.
But it's a labor of love, all
Yeah,
of it.
same with me. I work from morning to night, writing, reading. As you know, you have to read a lot as well, and,
That's right.
and to figure out how these things connect. And yeah, it's just. But it is the same thing for me. And a lot of people ask me, "Well, how do you do it?" You're just basically working nonstop all the time. And I just love this stuff. Same thing as you. And no, it's really interesting that you've done all that kind of research, and you're exactly right as well. It's so funny what they teach in the public schools about the presidents. They pick basically the worst ones, really, because they want to promote the statist sort of argument that FDR saved the U.S. from the Depression by spending money and all the Keynesian stuff like that.
Perhaps even worse, despite the universal high regard, was Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Because if you think about it, Lincoln took away freedom from millions of Southerners who wanted to secede. And a nation is supposed to be based on voluntary association. Well, here were people who wanted to choose not to voluntarily associate anymore, and they were met with death and destruction on a massive scale. And yet Lincoln is regarded as one of the greatest heroes in American history.
And he's on the penny.
Yep, he sure is. You asked earlier about concepts, and I mentioned Herbert Spencer. One of the great ideas that he put into my head that I have found to be so true is the growth of government and the costs that it imposes on the people. And these are very seldom mentioned in public. But he points out that every single law that's passed, every regulation, has two costs. First, the monetary cost of creating the law and enforcing it and putting it into action. You have to pay for that with some small percentage of your money that otherwise you could spend freely. And every law imposes a regulation on something you used to have the free ability to do. Now you can no longer do it without facing monstrous penalties. And when you think of how many laws, we were just talking after the panel, that there are now just under 5,000 different federal laws that you can be convicted for. Well, good Lord, the cost of all those regulations monetarily and in terms of human liberty is astonishing. And yet the general public shows so little concern for those facets.
Yeah, it's amazing. You've got such a long history in this. I've only been in this sort of line of thought for less than 10 years. You've been in it for a lot longer than that. What's your general feeling of, if I was going to guess, I would say that you would probably say that this sort of line of thinking, libertarianism, all that sort of stuff, is definitely on a growth path. Is that something that you see?
It is. It sure is. And one of the indications is simply the book sales of Atlas Shrugged. They are astonishing for a book that's been around for 50 years now. It still sells hundreds of thousands of copies. The internet has been a great facilitator of libertarian thought. We now have the von Mises Institute website, the Ayn Rand Institute website, the Cato website. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there are a huge number of libertarian websites that people are really going to, and I will give Ron Paul credit for bringing the ideas of libertarianism to literally millions who access his information sites. So it is growing. It's still on the order of maybe 1 out of 20,
Yeah.
but 40 years ago I'd say it was 1 out of 20,000.
Wow.
We are making progress, and we're having an effect kind of like the socialist intellectuals of the 1920s. They never achieved electoral success, but they exerted a tremendous influence on thinking that went full bloom during the administration of Franklin Roosevelt. Well, our intellectuals of the libertarian free market are, I believe, beginning to really exert an intellectual influence on the discussion of the American public. And perhaps the growth of the Tea Party, which isn't perfect, but at least it's a movement in the right direction, may be a result of that. So it's a battle. We're starting to chalk up a victory now and then.
Yeah, I think without the internet, there's no way this has any chance of ever coming to be.
Exactly. It's been a marvelous revelation, because up till now, governments could control what's spoken in the media, what books are being read in the education system. Now people can go home, turn their computers on, punch in the word libertarian or anarchist, and they've got a field day of a festival of literature in front of them.
That's right. And so tell us a little bit about what you do now. You've got your newsletter. Do you write a lot of this kind of stuff in your newsletter? Or?
I do. Wherever I can include these kind of thoughts, they're part and parcel. I write 3 commentaries each week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's generally geared toward the political and economic background and how it affects the metals. But if I can bring in an illustration of how a government regulation is harming the performance of an industry, I don't hesitate to bring those in. I also write for 9 different mining publications, ranging from political commentary. I have a monthly column with Resource World that gives me the freedom to do that, or just simple factual articles about mining enterprises. But again, keeps me busy, keeps me happy. I have no intention of ever retiring. And
that whole retirement concept is sort of, that's a bizarre concept anyway. That was basically sold to the public as, oh, you have to work as a slave for 40 years and then you can sit on the beach for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But I agree, like, I would never retire. And people ask me, well, you've made some money here or there, and why don't you just retire? It's like, what does that mean? I sit on the beach every day and don't do anything?
It's like you shut down huge portions of your life and able to retire. Why do you want to do that? I'm so fortunate in life. I travel around the world. I visit fascinating mining ventures, exploration projects. I meet wonderful people that are really reality-based as opposed to what's out there most of the time. And I won't say I'm getting wealthy, but I'm certainly not worried about where my next meal is coming from. And I wonder, what could I retire to that's better than that? I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
And I get to go to conventions and speak to a lot of people, get an occasional pat on the back. It's a wonderful life. I've been so fortunate. So until they have to carry me out, I don't give retirement any serious thought whatsoever.
That's great. Well, it looks like they're shutting down the conference here, so we better get going.
I think they're going to lock us in for the night if we don't get out of here. So.
All right. Well, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
You bet.
And keep up the
too.
fight to bring liberty to people. And I'm looking forward to your book. Do you have any timetable on when it'll be done?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get the rewrite of the book finished by October, early November at the latest. Then I'll start turning my full attention to the Grover Cleveland book.
Great.
Maybe by spring of the next year.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.
Oh, you betcha.